Hello, everyone. My name is Nora Lenz, and 20 years ago, I was fortunate to meet a truly objective, investigative, genius level polymath named Robert Rust. What qualified Robert to be the brilliant researcher and truth finder that he is was his ability to leave behind all beliefs. When he went looking for truth, he went looking for truth, and he didn't stop when he found the truth in one particular area. Instead, he looked into other areas and found information in them that allowed him to make connections between them. This is extremely important and is something that nobody else that I'm aware of has done. That's what makes the information that Robert shares with us so valuable and rare. Today, Robert and I are continuing our discussions regarding some of the discoveries he has made in the last several decades. I'll be asking some provocative questions of Robert that are based on the last video that we made about why humanity required civilization. It's my hope that in this video, it will be further revealed that Robert has discovered the threads that tie all of modern civilization's previously mysterious beginnings and current incongruences together and answer many questions that most people have about how and why things got so crazy. Hi, Robert.
Hey there. Nice to be here.
Before I start with the questions, I was thinking maybe you could briefly just summarize what we talked about in the last video.
Okay, sure. In our first video, we basically talked about crustal displacement, its existence, and how it works, and our ancient ancestors' knowledge about it and their living by it, and then how that came to change over the last 2,000 years due to our civilization being turned into a profiteering based, profit-making based civilization instead of one based on using science and technology to secure humanity's life as a full species on the planet, equally everywhere, for all people. So we talked about how the knowledge of crustal displacement was in mythology, recorded in it, which is a method by which our ancient ancestors recorded their scientific knowledge to secure it forever. And then there's various aspects of crustal displacement, such as it regulating life or evolution on Earth and dictating all the geology that we see on Earth's surface, and so much more. So basically a general explanation of it.
Okay, so we're going to start the questions, and they're sort of random. They're questions that occurred to me after the last video, and some questions that I collected from other people. There's really no rhyme or reason, just things that I thought would be good jumping off places for you to go ahead and explain things further, and some things that I've been genuinely curious about. So,
Yeah.
okay, so first question, I think I've got like 25 of them, just FYI. First question, as we discussed in the last video, mythology has been incorrectly interpreted for the last 6,000 years to the great detriment of our species. Are there any books or other resources you know of that correctly interpret mythology? And when I say mythology, I mean not just Bible mythology, but that of other cultures, such as Greek mythology. And I'll just say that growing up, there was so much, I mean, in my own education, there was so much emphasis on Greek mythology, and it's come to be known as the mythology that people think of when they hear the word mythology. And I'm just wondering why that is. And what I know of Greek mythology is that it's just crazy stories. It's nonsense. But it must mean something, right? Like all other forms of mythology do.
Yeah, it does. Well, the fact is that all of ancient civilization created mythology. That was the method that humanity had evolved to record scientific information, or the information they gain from studying nature, and particularly the behavior of the stars, the night celestial sky. And that study allowed them to understand how the Earth works, how it revolves around the sun, orbits the sun, how it rotates, how the seasons are created, made everything predictable to them. So understanding how the stars behave, how they moved around the sky, allowed humanity to understand how the Earth worked, to understand its 4 basic motions, and those motions govern life on Earth.
And all forms of mythology are about that.
Yeah, all forms are the same. They're repeats,
including the Greek mythology.
Right. There's one world civilization. Of course, they lived in different places, so they developed slightly different societies, different languages, but they all developed the same mythology because they were describing the same phenomena.
Okay.
And their life was based on it. That was their culture. So the cultures around the world were very similar, based on the same information, evolved the same way.
Okay. And are there any authors or books that you know of that have taken on the task of properly interpreting mythology?
Yeah, there are many written, probably hundreds.
Hundreds, really?
Oh yeah, you just have to start looking into it. I had mentioned in the previous video the book by Akaria S.
Okay,
He's the Jesus Christ Conspiracy, something like that.
The Christ Conspiracy.
And she has many references in her bibliography that a person can go to and read those authors.
Okay.
A great book to read is Hamlet's Mill. All right.
Okay.
Now it's
Hamlet's Mill.
Hamlet's Mill, and it describes the mythology of cultures all around the world, old ancient cultures that describe stars and the sun, the moon, and so forth in symbolic terms, in other words, in mythological terms. And it does this endlessly. It shows how they're all connected. It's very technical, very thorough.
Who's the author?
Yeah, they have different names. I have to get the book. I'll get it.
Oh, okay.
Okay. This is the
okay, yeah.
S book. And she has another. I'll get the slight break there. Hamlet's Mill.
Oh, okay.
And the authors are Giorgio de Santillana and Hertha von Deschand.
Okay. Is that a recent book? When was that written?
Oh, this is, no, not recent. It's, I don't know, what, 20 years old? More, probably.
Okay. Okay.
Let's see here. Copyright 1940.
1940?
1968.
1968. Oh, okay. So right away.
And it's brilliant and a long read, very long, detailed.
Okay.
And hundreds or probably thousands of names for gods, and they're all names of stars. So many of them are names of the sun and the moon, and certain constellations repeats.
And the people who wrote that book knew that.
They knew it, and all their authors they reference, the researchers knew too. Wow. And they have a bibliography that's 30 pages long.
So this information isn't completely lost. It's just kind of buried. It's just really
buried.
Hard to find.
It's not lost. It's readily and easily available, but we're not taught to look into it in our schools. That's totally avoided, just as Antoine Béchamp is avoided, who revealed true biology.
Right. Yeah.
It's buried.
Yeah. Right.
but it's sitting there and it's huge. We're
Okay.
talking thousands and thousands of researchers, scientific ones, that have explored this over hundreds of years.
Right. Okay.
The other book by Carrie S. is Sons of God,
Okay.
and main names for it. We have Krishna and Jesus and Buddha.
Okay.
And there are many other names. She lists them. And the Hamlet's Mill will point those out as well.
Okay. Super.
Okay.
All right.
Now,
Next question.
Yeah, well, the reason why Greek mythology and Roman mythology are pushed so much is because it just so happens that the parasite class who controls modern civilization also controlled those and promotes those civilizations because it controlled them.
It controlled them when they were actually happening.
Right. And so it's just repeating itself, its own stories, and so history, which rewrites itself.
Oh, okay.
And, you know, and they were very big at that time, and so their history.
And that brings me to another question that's farther down the list here. But since we know that the Phoenicians are the ones that are running things today and controlling all the information that we get, are they overrepresented in the history, the recounting of history, and are they given undue credit for contributions that they shouldn't be in the literature? The Phoenicians, yeah.
Well, the Phoenicians are a
because let me just explain. I remember hearing about the Phoenicians when I was learning about, you know, the history of the Middle East or whatever. I remember hearing about the Phoenicians, and my general impression of them is that they were very advanced and they built great ships, and they're you know, just a very advanced culture.
Yeah, like many others, they all were advanced, and that goes back tens of thousands of years and longer.
Okay,
so they're one of many. They just had a certain behavior that led to them dominating over all the others. And what they did, they inbred. They're very exclusive. World traders, profiteers. They're looking to make easy money off of trading. That's what they did. They were warmongers. They used war for profit and to create more profit. And they infiltrate the societies they trade with while remaining as Phoenicians. And in infiltrating, they become the leaders of that society, to take over positions that are prominent in the society, that allow them to manipulate and control the society and dominate over it, using the positions to dominate instead of participate.
Right.
So they've done that, and so then they became known as other societies, such as the Romans or Greeks or Egyptians, and now Americans.
But it was really always them pulling the strings.
Always them behind, yeah. It's always them. That's the origin, and they go back tens of thousands of years as regular humans, but about, you know, hard to say, but around by 6,000 years ago, they were well-established traders building cities, intercompeting cities of their own to dominate trade in the Mediterranean. Prior to that, like say 12,000 years ago, in the same area where they were just fishermen living simply, not trading like they started to do and develop cities, like, you know, Tyre and what is it? I forget. Anyways, big cities, city-states in that Eastern Mediterranean that competed with each other for making profit off trade, world trade.
Okay.
Anyways, so we have intercompeting Phoenicians, and they got rich. Two levels: the rich Phoenicians that owned everything, and then the lower class, which still exists today, that structure.
Right. Okay. Um, and the next question is about the Phoenicians too. Is the fact that they were a seafaring people responsible for our current legal system being based on maritime, or what's sometimes called admiralty law?
Yeah, and that's the case.
Yes, that's
The
true.
Phoenicians were shipping traders and military. So they had a navy and they went out invading other societies in the Mediterranean,
Hmm.
warring with them, creating war, and of course, trading with others. And by that, they developed a sea society. So they're originally fishermen developed into seafaring traders
Okay.
to make profit.
Okay.
And on that, they based law. They made up laws: maritime law, admiral law, artificial law, sea law, all that.
And if you don't know about the origins of this parasite class, then it's a bit of a mystery, because I know lots of people who understand that maritime law, it's crazy for us to be ruled by maritime law or admiralty law.
Right.
But they don't understand why it got started that way, why that's the case.
Yeah. Yeah. It's recent, only in the last 6,000 years, when modern civilization effectively started becoming a profit-based civilization using science and technology and communication to increase profit, make profit, to serve the Phoenicians' business, their income,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
serve them
Mm-hmm.
and not humanity as a whole.
Right.
We became advanced with all the technical developments, but they're not stable, secure technologies that allow humanity to live forever on a crustal displacement regulated Earth.
Right. Okay. Speaking of stable civilizations, isn't it true that in a correct, stable civilization, like all those that preceded modern civilization, the concept of something being old-fashioned would be unknown, and that many other scourges would not exist, like poverty, corruption, disease, drug abuse, industrial medicine, rebellion, war, pollution, degradation of nature, etc.?
It's true. To call a, a species history old fashioned is to call that current version of the species headed for extinction.
Extinction.
We look at nature and we see species evolving in nature to develop a stable, precise way of life that allows them to live in their little niche. They need to stay like that forever. It took them a long time to evolve that, to adapt to it. And whatever they did correct stayed. If they did something incorrect, they would die. And so they end up doing behavior that allows them to live in that part of nature they exist in. And so that's stability, and it goes forever. As long as it doesn't change, the species stays. But when it changes, then it puts its life at risk, because it takes a while for nature to determine whether that's going to be successful. So today, as we live with modern civilization, we're changing all the time. That in itself tells us we're unstable.
Right.
We were stable for millions of years. We were doing the same thing. And now suddenly we're changing like crazy.
Yeah.
That means we're unstable. And but we call it, we try to make ourselves look good, and we call the past bad because it was so
Right.
stable. Call that old fashioned. And we're
Right.
really saying we're unstable, we're in danger, we're clueless. We have no touch with our former stability and solidity. We're lost.
All that richness was lost, all that knowledge,
All
all
the
of that
previous knowledge and the
foundation.
stability is lost. Yeah,
Right.
and we have extremely fantastic knowledge today, science and technology, but it's frail.
Right.
It's there for profiting,
Right.
making a billion different goods to excite consumers to buy them, so that the manufacturers can skim off 2% profit or 10%, whatever.
Right.
And that is the basis of the economic system of modern civilization, profit. the
And
growth.
that's all completely new. That was unknown before 6,500 years ago.
That's right. That's a result of world trading, started by the Phoenicians to create profit. That's new. That started 6,000 years ago. Didn't exist before that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question. We discussed briefly last time that the concept of humans being ruled over by other humans was something that was new with the Phoenicians. And I've had conversations with people since then about that. And many people will use examples of so-called leadership in nature, like alpha, like wolves have an alpha, or when geese fly south, they have a leader goose, and they use that as a justification for saying that being ruled or having some individuals among a population ruling is natural. Can you explain the difference between those two?
Sure. First, I'll just mention, though, in the previous questions, all these other scourges such as poverty and corruption, disease, and so forth would not exist were we living like we had in the past, in the old-fashioned way, the stable way. And these are a product of our rapacious, profit-seeking system today, where the rich get very rich and control everything, and the poor act as slaves. All right, that's our structure. Okay, anyway, so this question, the so-called leadership.
Leaders in nature, yeah.
Well, in nature, there is no one leader or king of a pack of which the pack then follows dutifully, uninstinctively, unsensibly. All right, that's a manufactured recent development starting 6,000 years ago, and that is through the richness and power and control created by the Phoenicians, who were trading to create those riches. All right, and they infiltrate and they take over certain positions in society, like business structure or chieftainships, and they turn those into rulership positions and dictate what other people have to behave like in order to maximize the profit and benefit to those Phoenicians. All right.
Right.
So in nature, say alpha wolves, they're not the king or the leader of the pack. They're acting instinctively, and they're allowing the wolf pack to perform at its best.
Right, it's for the community.
It's for the whole community. And that wolf, who's the wolf, leading wolf, he has to still do all the same functions as every other wolf.
Right.
Right. He doesn't get away with anything.
Right. He's taking on extra responsibility. He gets nothing back for it.
Yeah. He just
except
acts
he
like
gets to
himself.
exist.
Yeah. He acts like himself. He, has fights with other wolves in order to present as the strongest wolf for the female, to give the best genes passed, right? And there you go.
Mm-hmm.
And other males recognize that, and they have their place. They'll look after the other wolves more, or just be a little bit down, but they still all mate and create young. So it creates a societal structure, a very complex one, with each individual performing their part, that then is stable and secure and allows that wolf population to live forever or exist forever, right? Or
Right.
a long time.
Right.
So that, and the leader goose, there's no leader goose. When you see a V formation, they exchange. One gets tired and then
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Okay.
Oh yeah, they're always doing that. And there's the male goose, the female goose, and they each have their part. Each acts as a female or a male. They don't try to be each other or equal.
Mm-hmm.
They're equal in that they're animals, but they're not equal in being the same thing.
Right.
All right. They're not the same. They're different.
Right.
They need difference. In nature, you need the two.
Right.
To work together to create the one whole.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's no natural analog for the concepts of ruling or monarchy or
None.
what we have in civilization.
No, just participation amongst different qualities of a species that contribute to the whole,
Right.
and benefit the whole, nobody profiting over the other. Everyone's working, no
Okay.
one's skimming,
Right.
no one gets a free ride, no one's above the other, no one suffers, everyone loves what they're doing, everyone lives and has a great life.
Right. It kind of reminds me of how we're presented with this choice, this supposed choice, like left and right, left versus right, that's like capitalism versus communism. Like those are the only two choices. Well, you don't want either one. You want
No.
something where the whole community is
Right. You want
benefiting.
what's called natural, right? You want natural.
Right.
The case is that the Phoenicians, they're one big inbreeding family, and they make communism and democracy. Those are the same family members behind it. The left is the same as the right. It's the same
Right.
family.
Yep.
Just create this mirage that there's two different ones.
Yes.
And by voting for one, you're getting something better, and then vote for the other, get something better there. And then you
Yeah.
fight amongst each other, and by that you're divided.
Right.
And when you're divided, you're conquered. And so that's the method.
Exactly. And it works really well.
It works super well. People are arguing with each other against each other instead of all standing up against the family that's ruling them,
Right.
dictating what they can do or not.
Right. So next question, you mentioned a few minutes ago that people would, in a natural, stable society, love what they do. So the next question is, people often realize that the things they must do for their jobs vary from slightly unethical to just plain wrong. But the notion that all things are okay as long as some business interest is being served seems to prevail. It seems to me that this is entirely upside down, as most things in modern civilization are, and that such an idea would never have existed in successful, sustainable previous civilizations. People would love what they do. They would always love what they do.
Right.
Life would be a
The
joy.
more, right. The more a person's connected to earth, like such as growing their own food and then eating it, touching it, the more they feel they belong to it, and instinctively feel that. And it gives a superb sense of well-being, connected to the earth and the past and to life. All right. And with our modern technology, we think we have to work in offices and so forth, and that's it. But it isn't. We're looking outdoors and wishing we were in the sunshine, the breeze, nature, dreaming of going to the tropics, right? That's from our heart, from our core. That's telling us what's needed by us.
Right. We need to listen to that. Right.
Right. And so, we're taught to ignore that from, 5 years old.
Right.
So,
and that it's normal to be a slave. It's normal to hate your job. It's normal to hate life.
Yeah. So we get endless excuses, endless rationalizations to justify the Phoenicians' modern civilization business.
Right.
Right. You gotta work at your job, just do it, save up money, retire, and then live out the rest of your decrepit life because you beat yourself up so much while you're living earlier.
Right. Which was normal.
And so
it's all normal.
Yeah, we call that normal.
Yeah.
And so with business, it's for the business, so it becomes artificial, and you're willing to do something wrong or unethical because it profits the business, and you separate yourself from that even though you did it yourself. So you lose your humanity. You turn yourself into a robot machine.
Right.
You walk away from your heart, your humanity. And that's what the profiteering system is all about. Inhumane, unethical, immoral, against nature. It's not how nature works. It's not how the hundreds of thousands of other species work. It's how modern humans work. But by our instability, our constantly changing, we know we're not stable. And instability in nature means that's extinction. You're going extinct.
Okay. Speaking of going to the tropics, when people discover that humans are a tropical species, they often feel a compelling urge to drop modern life and move to the tropics. I've known people who have done that. They, like many others, put all forms of civilization in the same category without realizing how utterly dependent on it we are. Can you explain why moving to the tropics cannot allow a person to be wild or even escape civilization?
Well, by civilizing ourselves in order to endure through crustal displacement, we lost our knowledge that we had how to live in the wild. There are still wild tribes that do that, but they're few and far between. And you might measure in 10,000 right across the full Earth, and they still live that way. But all humanity doesn't. We can't do that because we're being moved out of the tropics into the temperate constantly, regularly by the crustal displacements. So we lost that cultural knowledge that we would pass on to our next generations. And we don't know how to do that anymore. If we want to live in the wild, we have to go to these wild tribes and they would have to teach us, but that's the last thing they'll do because we're a threat to them.
Right.
We're strange to them.
Right.
They would rather probably protect themselves from us, right?
Right. It would be dangerous. It would be risky.
Yeah. So we don't know the jungle. We don't know the dangers. We don't know the food, how, what to eat and so on. And just what culture to have that is going to be stable. Allow that little tribe to live stably for a long time, securely and happily, right? We don't know how to do that. We know how to make profit and money and try and get rich and happy. And if we're not rich, we're poor and sad. Right. And we're dependent on that now. That's what we know how to do. So we can't go to wild, right? And civilization is very necessary for us. We evolved that civilization, a properly behaving one, as a result of crustal displacements, right? It changed the climate zones we were in. It moved us out of the tropics into the temperates, changed geology around us, and we had to learn how to adapt that. We used our thinking ability, our unique thinking ability, to study nature, create inventions that would allow us to live in those new conditions. And then we became habituated to it. And our lives become dependent on it. We can't just change to this, that, and the other every year. You have to develop a stable life you can teach your kids. And then you become dependent on it wherever it leads. If it goes in the right direction, it gets tested by nature and it's strong, okay. But if it's full of wrong behaviors, it won't get through nature's
challenges,
tests.
Right. Yeah.
All the challenges. And then that's extinction.
So just because
you can make changes, but you find out in the long run whether they're successful or not.
Right. Everybody recognizes the modern civilization is crazy and unsustainable. So they think that all civilization is bad and that the only thing that we can go back to is wildness, but we can't be wild. We can't be wild.
We lost that information, that knowledge. We take hundreds of thousand years to learn it again. It took us millions of years to develop it. We can't do it overnight. We have no knowledge about it, no inkling at all. We don't know which animals are dangerous and where to go in the jungle and so forth. So if we go there, we're basically walking towards our death.
Right.
So we depend on civilization to save ourselves, to give ourselves a long-term chance on Earth. And the civilization has to be a correctly behaving one. And that was learned through evolution, and it's very strict. It says no to certain types of behavior and yes to others. Very strict. Today, with modern civilization, everything goes.
Right.
As long as it makes money.
Right.
And that makes civilization today the killer of humanity.
Right.
The destabilizer of it.
Right.
The rapist of it. Right? It's raping the labor of it to create goods and profit, not security for humanity as a whole on Earth. So we need civilization. And the civilization we had, that's ancient civilization. We'd have to relearn that. But of course, that history has been lost. We're not living anymore. And so even that we don't know. We have evidence in ruins of how they made buildings. We have their mythology to see how they recorded information. We have some cultural evidence investigating, village or ruins and the structure of towns and so forth. We can see kind of how they live, but those are just small parts. And we've lost the rest of the information, so we're sitting here lost. We have no guide except make money.
Right.
And so if we face something that comes from nature that's testing and we can't live through, well, we can't live through it. We go extinct.
Right.
All right. Whereas before we had a way of life that could get through that.
Okay. Next question has to do with religion. We have heard you in previous videos denigrating something we rarely hear anyone speaking negatively about, and that is spirituality. To almost everyone, it seems like a harmless alternative to organized religion. Please explain how spirituality is just as misguided as religion, and how both have falsely staked a claim on all things moral, humanitarian, and empathy related. How can we be moral, complete, warm, loving humans without religion or spirituality?
Well, we can be that way just by following our natural instincts, our senses, right? Our instincts are our behavior that we created based on our senses. We see things, hear things, taste things, and feel things inside ourselves, and then relate to others. And based on that, we create repetitive behavior, and that's our instinctive behavior, all right? And we evolved that, and so that developed into a stable way of life for us over those hundreds of thousands and millions of years. So this comes from within ourselves. So moral, you want to do good for yourself at the same time for others. You don't want to hurt others, right? That comes from your heart, from within. All right.
And that's natural for humans. That's normal.
Natural. That's natural.
You don't have to be taught that, right?
No, that naturally happens. You don't need religious books or spirituality coming in magically from somewhere or from an authority who has a certain version of it. No, this is natural. As natural as seeing. It's natural as seeing a tiger and knowing that's a danger, or seeing somebody hugging another person and knowing, oh, I like that. That's warm. All right. Or helping something that's injured or going to be hurt from that. Right. That's from our heart. That's natural. It doesn't have to be taught at all. That's humane. Okay. So loving, same thing. Warm, complete. Loving just means caring, especially appreciating other people, wanting, liking what they do, and being inspired by it and so forth. It's all kinds of stuff like that. That's a human quality, a very strong one. We're a very social creature, and our niche, our life and our niche in nature depends on it. Right? It's instinctive. And so, anyways, so the term spirituality, well, it comes from the term spirit, and spirit's another word for ghost. Right? Now, spirit is an old word for the light coming off the sun, or the behavior coming from a person, their actions. The sun is an object, and it shines. And so the light that comes from it is called the spirit of the sun, the action of the sun. And we have the moonlight, that's the spirit of the moon. It's the image of the sun, the reflection, the ghost of the sun. It's just the reflection of the light from the sun hitting the moon coming to us. So the light we see of the moon is not the moon, it's the ghost of the sun. It's the spirit of it, the light. And so now when I act and I talk and I behave, you see my behavior coming to you. And that's my spirit. All right?
It's not something that's within you that is going to continue after your body is dead.
Yeah, it's not that. My spirit, my behavior, that's what spirit really means, truly means, only exists as I behave.
Right.
As I do my action exists, and we call that spirit. And once I stop that action, poof,
there's no spirit. Right.
Spirit is not there anymore. Right. I could shift to a different spirit. I could be happy and loving, or then I could be angry. So two different spirits, but they're part of my all behavior, right?
And that's going to end when you die.
When I die, that's gone. I just lie there, the spirit of a dead body lying there doing nothing. That's my spirit. And I start rotting and I start smelling bad. and then I have the smelly spirit. Okay, that's how it works. There's no ghosts. Life is not made of ghosts. All right. Life's made of real stuff. You touch yourself, right?
Life is physical.
That's solid,
Mhm.
and it acts. I can run fast, and you say, "There's the spirit of running elk. He's fast." Right? You have the wolf spirit. You know how wolves behave in packs, family, and they howl. So we say that's a wolf spirit. And the human spirit's a little different. We don't howl. Right? We see the moon, we just appreciate its light and marvel at how beautiful it is, but we don't howl at it.
Mhm.
So every species has its own unique behavior. In other words, its own unique spirit. And it does that in its behavior. And when it dies, it's over. And its young carry on that same behavior because they were taught it by their parents.
And that's how the spirit continues
That spirit.
in the young.
Right. Yeah. It's taught behavior. Some of it's instinctive, like lifting the leg to go to the bathroom for a dog.
Mhm.
All right. But half of it's also taught. Right. Where to hunt, what foods to eat. Right. How to protect yourself, watch out for predators, how to build accommodation, dig a hole somewhere in a cave, or in our case, a house. That's all taught.
Mhm.
And we need that. All animals need it, but humans especially, because our lives depend on studying nature to create artificial forms of living so that we can live on Earth forever.
Because we're so physically vulnerable, right? We're so fragile as a species.
Extremely fragile, probably the most fragile species on the planet. Very weak digestion because we're fruit eaters. We have no fur to protect us, no claws, no fangs. We're a loving creature. We hate gore and blood. We stay away from that. It scares the heck out of us.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're very tender, and our mission nature is very small and precise. We can live nicely in a certain low temperature range, or a small temperature range from like say 60 to 80 or 90 degrees, but outside that we start freezing our butt off.
Mm-hmm.
And our food, our natural food is very simple. That's fruit, and that grows in the tropics but not in the north. And we have our weak digestion, which prevents us from eating other raw foods. We'd have to cook it, and then we go into disease because it overburdens our body. So we're very delicate.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. That's
so
so contrary to the propaganda that we hear about how great we are and we're so powerful, and
no,
on and on.
We're very weak as a species, and that's one of the reasons why we're using our brain to develop all these protective systems around us, like houses and cars and whatever machinery. Right? We don't have that in ourselves. We build it to protect ourselves from the rest of the world that's threatening us.
Okay. Okay, next question.
Right. I mean, yeah, what on spirituality or religion, we're not ghosts. Spirituality is acting as if there's something outside of us that comes into us, and we have to try and tune into this to follow it. Well, that's the exact opposite we need to do. You need to go to your heart, what your body instinctively inside is saying. That's you. You're made of solid matter, extremely complex, run by DNA, and that has already that knows how to do it and what to do. You listen to that with your feeling and your instincts, your sense, how your brain will be thinking, right? Mm-hmm. It comes from within, not from somewhere else. And the body is creating it itself through its cells. All that, all right? Mm-hmm. It's an action. It's like tennis, the game of tennis doesn't hide behind bushes to ambush people walking by to force them to play tennis. All right? Mm-hmm. Tennis is made by a human, multiple humans playing a certain motions with each other. And then we call that tennis, that behavior. Mm-hmm. And once they stop that behavior, tennis is over. Right. It's not run behind a bush to hide and catch these guys an hour later. No, it's over. And that's how spirituality is. Spirituality is behavior. You say act mad for a while, okay, you stop. Mad now doesn't go hide behind the kitchen door waiting to hijack you again so you can get mad at another person. No, you create madness in yourself based upon being mistreated by another or something. Right?
Yeah.
Keep it real. There's no
Right.
ghost. Life isn't a ghost. Spirit means ghost. Ghost is the image of, the behavior of. You can't touch it. It's not solid. It's fleeting. It's just a behavior. You can't hold on to behavior. You can hold on to that which is behaving, but not the behavior.
Okay.
Okay, I went over that purposefully over again just to drive it home.
That's great. Thank you. So the next question refers back to the explanation that you gave us in the last video about Noah and the ark and where that metaphor came from and what it really meant. I was wondering if you could share some other famous like Bible stories or stories of mythology that should be interpreted differently than how they are.
Yeah, there's a lot of it goes on endlessly.
Like
Noah's
famous
class.
ones, the most famous ones. Think of some famous ones.
Okay. Of course, we have the Noah story. That's just day turning to night sky, flood of the night sky by darkness, and then returning to light in the morning.
Like Bible
Yeah.
stories, like
Yeah.
you know, Sodom and Gomorrah. What's that about? I mean, I don't know very many Bible stories, so I don't even know.
Yeah, it should be a story of the stars. All these figures that are in the story of, say, Sodom and Gomorrah are stars or constellations.
Mm-hmm.
And the events that happen in are just describing things like, say, the Milky Way, how it would look like a pillar of salt, and a star might be inside or a constellation behind it, beside it. And in the story, they made up that constellation, which would be a female one or a female star, given a female name, would be said to look back and see the Milky Way. And because the star was right beside it, would be said to turn into a pillar of salt or something like that, right? So they're just making this colorful. They're describing the stars in a very colorful story form so you remember it. Mm-hmm. And it's very important not to take the behavior literally as if it's describing what a human do. It's just a story made up. So you remember where that star is in relation to the rest of the sky. Mm-hmm. All right. Now we have the Exodus story. That's a famous one, right?
I'm not familiar with it, but I'm probably the only
one.
The
Exodus is describing the so-called leaving of Egypt by the Jews to go to the promised land in the east. Mm-hmm. They were said to be enslaved by Egypt and then escape, led by Moses. Mm-hmm. All right. So this is a story form description of basically day and night and the appearance of the night sky. That's all it is. And during this so-called exodus of the Jews from Egypt, we have these plagues happening, 10 plagues of Egypt. And these plagues are merely descriptions of evening coming, darkness coming, every single one.
It has nothing to do with insects or pestilence or disease.
No, those happen on Earth, but they're being used in the story form to describe that nighttime is coming. Okay. So we're not taught this in school, all these mythological terms, because the schools are schooling, all of it is run and controlled by the Phoenicians. Mm-hmm. And they're the ones that literal first forced humanity to take all our mythology literally as description of the earth and actual humans instead of stars. And then they give mythology a bad name. They say, oh, mythology is just a myth, all these weird stories. Mm-hmm. Like say Zeus or let's say Apollo and all the other Greek gods and so forth. Mm-hmm. It's just myth. It's not true, sort of, but it is true. Just that it's in story form, and you have to look beyond that the human description and see the information behind it. Now, so the Exodus is the so-called Jews running out of, escaping from Egypt. Now, we're not taught that Egypt actually is a word meaning daytime. It means the day sky.
Mm-hmm.
And Israel is an old term meaning night sky. It's an old Egyptian term. Is for Isis, moon.
Mm-hmm.
That's Egyptian. Ra for the sun, just the object sun, not the daytime sun or nighttime sun, just the sun in general.
Mm-hmm.
That's Ra. And El, which means star. Moon, sun, star. The night sky. All right? The celestial sky. We see it at night. And Egypt means the day sky, and the day is when it's hot. And during the day, you can't see the night sky. And so in mythology, that's described as the day sky enslaving the night sky. All right?
Mm-hmm.
And enslaving Israel, the residents of Israel, the stars. It doesn't allow them to act. It buries them. And so in the Exodus, when the so-called Jews are leaving Egypt, the Jew has placed itself into the Bible and said it's the Israelite, right? It's added that word there, and people then falsely interpret that Israelite means Jew, but it doesn't. Israelite means a star.
Mm.
It means an object in the night sky that we can see. They're out there all the time, but we only see them at night. Mm-hmm. And so the stars, Israel is being enslaved by daylight Egypt. And as the earth rotates, the stars start to appear. And so they're said to be escaping daytime to rise in the promised land, which is the east. That's where all stars rise, because the earth rotates to the east. Mm-hmm. And it's the promised land because that's where the horizon is, and the stars come above that. So that land is the horizon, and the stars rise. That's the promised land. Mm-hmm. And it's promised because the universe is promising that, because the earth rotates. It can't be prevented. It will happen every day.
It's guaranteed.
Yeah, it's guaranteed. Don't worry about it. Mm-hmm. It's promised by the universe and how it works. The earth is part of going around the sun rotating. It's guaranteed. Mm-hmm. So this is what the knowledge is. It's a description of nature, but it's turned into story form, which then has been pushed literally to act as if it happened on earth by real people. And so now this has been turned into history. So we have a totally made up history. It's not true. It didn't happen. Mm-hmm. We based our lives on something that didn't happen. We just made it up.
There was no exodus of people leaving one country and going to another.
No, none. It's just stars in the sky appearing. And the 10 plagues that come about just describe darkness coming. So we have frogs appearing. Well, frogs croak at night to attract mates when it gets dark. Mm-hmm. So it's just saying it's getting dark. Mm-hmm. And then you have the mites and lice or whatever appearing at nighttime. That can describe a couple things. At nighttime, little kids scratch their heads because they're eating cooked food and get a little itchy when they go to bed and complain about it. And so you can say, okay, they got lice, right? But it's really just cooked food irritation. And also the lice are little sparkly things. It's like they're in the sky, little
like stars.
You got the stars appearing, right? Mm-hmm. Other ones, parts of the 10 plagues, we have locust storms. Mm-hmm.
They're dark in the sky.
Yeah, you have a locust storm. They get trillions of them down there in the desert, certain times. It just blocks out the sky. It turns dark. You can't see hardly. Mm-hmm. Right. Then we have the animals going crazy, like the cattle and so forth, or taking over, spreading all over. And this is just the constellations of the zodiac appearing. It's Taurus and Capricorn, the goat, and the bull and the goat, and you got the ram, Aries, and horse, Sagittarius. All right, they're becoming visible in the sky and taking over. right? Running free. And so it's describing nighttime coming. And what are some other, you have the flies and coming out. Of course, those are coming out at night. When it cools down a bit, flies come out, bugs come out, right? And we have other wild animals coming out around the earth. The constellations are all named after wild animals. Yeah. Or all animals. And so when it gets dark, those come out and take over go everywhere in the sky. You see them all over. The world, that's an old term for the celestial sky. It's not the earth world, which we think of it as. World in ancient description is the world above us that we see. The dome of the sky around us, that's the world. At nighttime, it's full of stars and the moon. And so when they say world, they're talking the sky. But when we say world, we were talking about the earth itself. So there's confusion.
Right.
And that's the case with so many words, all of them with mythology. We read the word and we interpret it as this, but it actually means that. And every word's like that. And so you end up with a total misinterpretation of what that mythology is saying.
Right.
Okay, so other plagues. What are some of them? I had them listed, written down. One of them is interesting. One of the last ones, signals is that there'll be, or the ruler of the Egypt, Pharaoh, will go around and slaughter all the Jew babies, trying to eliminate them. But they're protected by the Arch of the Sky, which has, I'm screwing this one up.
What does that really mean?
What it means is that to protect the young Jews, lamb's blood was over their doorway, right? And that's just describing the constellation Aries appearing in the sky in the east where the stars rise.
Right.
The blood is just the red sunset.
Okay. It has nothing to do with people. It has nothing to do with babies. It has to do with the stars. That's the important thing.
Right. The young stars, Israelites, of course, Israel, are rising in the east, and that's where the the skies.
And those are the young stars, the ones that rise in the east.
Yeah, they're protected. Then they're saying they're protected. They're going to rise because they got their lamb constellation that's rising as well. You got the red sky and the developing in the west, and they're just linking that.
Okay.
So yeah, these are some of the plagues. I like the frog one, right? Everyone puzzles with that. Why frogs? Well, because they ribbit at night. They attract mates, and that means darkness. And you need darkness to see the stars. You need darkness to see Israel. That's the promised land. It's escaping from the daytime, which is called Egypt. The real name for Egypt that we know of as a country is Kemet. All right, that's the old word for it, the original word. And it just means the black soil of the Nile, which has all kinds of chemicals in it. It can be used to make concrete and, of course, grow all kinds of vegetables, fruits, and so forth. It's very rich. The black soil. And it got turned to Egypt by the very people that took over the country, which is the Phoenicians.
Okay.
So, okay, here's some other mythology. Okay, Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Jack fell down and broke his crown, and Jill came tumbling after. It's just describing constellation Virgo, and I think, what is it? Boots, not boots, no. Well, the male one is I forget his name. Anyways, they're two constellations close together. One represents the female, one the male, and they rise up to the height in the sky, and then they fall down. They come down. Earth rotates. They go up high in the sky. You see the night. Earth keeps rotating, and they set. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's Jack and Jill.
And it has nothing to do with two little kids. I remember hearing that, and everybody's heard it when they're a little kid, right? They hear that, and just trying to make sense of something like that. It's like, so they were carrying a bucket and they fell down, and I mean, it's so irrelevant. It's meaningless. It's senseless.
Yeah.
But
So once
there's
you
a
understand
million
the
of those, right, that have
right,
meaning
right.
behind them.
Right. So if you understand what some of the terms are, Jack and Jill, male and female stars, constellation went up the hill. That's the arc of the sky to fetch a pail of water. Well, waters is a name of ancient name for the universe, all the waters of space where all the stars are. So they're going up there. They're coming up to be part of that, to fetch a pail of water, of the waters
Mm-hmm.
of the celestial sky. Then they reach the top. Jack falls down and tumbles down. That means he's reached his peak, and now he starts coming down because the Earth is still rotating.
Mm-hmm.
And Jill, of course, who's slightly behind, the constellation behind, comes tumbling after. She starts coming down after because she's just behind that constellation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's all. That's all it means.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have other ones. There's so many of our stories today, especially nursery rhymes, they're all based on that. We have Snow White, the moon.
Snow White is the moon.
Yeah. So that's a story based on that completely.
And the seven dwarfs?
Yeah. There are 7 constellations. They're Nordic ones, Scandinavian ones. And there are certain constellations in the sky that people knew what they were then, a deer and an eagle, different names for those constellations that are in the sky, high up in the sky. And they all been related to the moon because they all appear in the sky, right? And to darkness itself, the prince of darkness, right? Mm-hmm. Darkness loves the moon, and the moon loves darkness because the moon can then be seen. It's beauty. It's a full moon. It's beautiful. That's Snow White. All right. And the prince goes to save her. That's darkness coming to save her, to make her visible. When it's light, you don't see the moon. And so they naturally love each other.
Oh, wow.
All right. And then you have the evil witch who wants to poison her. And the witch, or the old hag, she's Venus. All right. Mm-hmm. And she's beautiful, morning and evening star, seen near the sun and then disappears because daylight comes. And she's jealous in story form of the moon because the moon's so much more beautiful. And so that old hag in story form wants to kill the moon so the hag can be the most beautiful girl ever all the time. Mm-hmm. So she goes out and tries to poison her with an apple. Or at first she has the hunter go out and trying to kill her, but the hunter has sympathy and doesn't. And then the old hag, which is Venus, notices later that the moon is still around in Snow White. She's still living because the moon disappears, goes to a new moon, then you get a full moon, right? And say, hey, it's still there. The hunter didn't kill him. Hey, you didn't do a job I hired you to do. So I'm going out to kill her myself. So the hag goes out and feeds her poison apples, right? Snow White. And then Snow White falls into a sleep. She goes away. Well, that's new moon. All right. Mm-hmm. So she's lying. She meets the dwarves, who are these constellations in the sky, the moon, right? This deer constellation and the eagle constellation, Dopey and Happy and so forth. These are all names of these constellations. You can look up on the mythology. It describes it well in Hamlet's Mill, in other mythology, and you can read it yourself and interpret it, but I think Carrie S. does as well, and describes how these are just names. Dopey is the name of a certain constellation such as what is it? I forget. It's a certain animal, something that's kind of dopey, and there's the happy one, and so forth. So there's 7 dwarves, 7 constellations, old ones from Scandinavian mythology that has been borrowed by other cultures to create this modern Snow White story. So anyways, she lives with the dwarves and serves them, helps them out. And then the witch comes by and poisons her, and they put her in a glass coffin. Okay, the glass coffin is the sky. And she's dead in there because she's a new moon now. You can't see her. All right. And then the prince comes along because he's looking for her. And the prince is the prince of darkness. It's darkness. That's what prince means. All right. And he's trying to find her. And he comes up to her and gives her a kiss. So she's now turning into quarter moon, the crescent moon. Right. He wakes up and then becomes the full moon. And she lives with the prince, darkness, happily ever after. Right? That's the story. Very colorfully made. And if you're not taught that what is actually explaining the behavior of the sky, the earth, and so forth, you think it's just this silly nature. I mean, nursery rhyme type story. Entertain yourself watching some Hollywood movie. You're devoid of all that information it contains. You're disconnected from earth. All right? And that's what this Phoenician clan does. It just takes all our old information that stabilized us and turns it into some profit-making nonsense.
And all fairy tales are like that. They all have that knowledge
Cinderella.
base that's been lost.
Here we have Cinderella. That's the crescent moon, the quarter crescent moon. The glass slipper. Her foot slips into it. The slipper is curved, right? That shoe. That's a quarter moon. And of course, she falls in love with the prince, and the prince with her, because he sees how beautiful the quarter moon is. But she has to escape at midnight, else she turns back into a pumpkin. Anyways, so she goes home, then the prince, where'd you go? So he searches all over for her. And he searches the kingdom and tries to fit the glass slipper to these ladies' shoes, right? And whichever one fits will be the one. So he goes to her castle, and she has 2 sisters, 2 ugly sisters, which are Venus, morning star, and Venus, evening star, right? You can't see it in the day because it's near the sun. And they're not as beautiful as the moon. They're not beautiful, but they're not the moon, which is just spectacular compared to Venus. And so he tries to slip around them, and it doesn't work. Then they say, oh, there's Cinderella, and she comes out and tries on, and boom, it's a perfect fit, because she is the crescent moon. And then they live happily ever after.
Okay.
So it's a repeat of Snow White, just in a story met by another group of people, right?
Right.
And then we have Rapunzel. There's another one. You know, Rapunzel lets her hair down so the guy can climb up, and they spend time together with the prince, right? Well, she's the moon again, and she's letting her hair down, her golden shine at nighttime come down from her mount, from her tower that she's trapped in. And the tower is just the sky above us, the axis of Earth going up into the heavens, right, where the sky hangs from. Looking down on us, and the sun, the moon is looking down on us, or shining down. So she eventually escapes and flees out into the woods, where she's not seen for a while, and has some kids, but then is seen full again. Has her seen full again, gets pregnant. That's the pregnant moon, the full moon, has kids, and then lives forever.
The pregnancy denotes a full moon.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's Mary. When you're pregnant, when the female's pregnant, that means full moon, and then it gives birth, just like women do. And no men are around because it's the female giving birth. They don't need a man around to do that. So full moon means pregnancy. Pregnancy means full moon.
Okay.
So that.
Okay, we gotta move on here. I think I'm gonna just ask a couple questions here, moving into crustal displacement. And then I think we're going to have to save the rest of the questions for a part 2 video,
Yeah,
because we're only on
right.
question number 12. No, question 11. So getting more into geology, why do you say that modern geology is politically stuck in Unitarianism and other false ideas? Please explain your meaning of the word political in this context. And you might want to explain also what you mean by Unitarianism as
Well, it's
well.
actually uniformitarianism.
Uniformitarianism.
Right.
Okay.
So modern geology is ruled by that, and that's the political. There's no evidence to support it, or very little, not complete. And it just says the Earth has been behaving the way it has in the past as it is now, or behaving now as it has in the past, constantly, always slow change, never anything fast
Mm-hmm.
action.
Mm-hmm.
The whole universe just slowly changing, no cataclysms.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the evidence, geologic evidence, clearly states that there's times in our past where great change suddenly happened over short periods of time. Floods wiped out species, huge land surfaces, and climate change, very dramatic, and geological events such as mountain lifting and earthquakes and vast areas that occurred. Endless evidence to show this.
Mm-hmm.
Yet geology denies that and says, no, everything's stable and slow changing.
Mm-hmm.
Hapgood pointed out in his book, Crustal Displacement, all these changes. And you can read about it in regular geological literature to see it. Devastating flood, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dead bodies of animals all collected together, and on and on. All right. So there is no such a thing as uniformitarianism. It's the how geology works is it works like a ticking clock. You get this uniform, gentle swing, and then a sudden change at the end going in the other direction. And that's the big cataclysm that creates all the change.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get a slow swing to the other side, and then a sudden big change. So geology of the Earth, Crustal Displacement, is working like a clock,
Like a pendulum.
like a pendulum. It's smooth
Mm-hmm.
for say 15,000 years, and then all of a sudden there's a crustal displacement. Great change happens, and that's what we see in our geological features and our changes in life.
Mm-hmm.
And then it stabilizes for another 15,000 years. It swings to the other end. All of a sudden hits huge change, which forces change in life to adapt, and geological change occurs. And that's where most of the change on the structure of the Earth's surface occurs, in that changing period. And so when you look at the evidence, you discover that, and that's what the evidence says. But geology blinds itself to that. It just ignores that and says, no, everything's always changing the same. It's like a pendulum swinging that swings forever, never ticks back.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's false. It's stuck in it. It's political. What political means, okay, if you want to get into geology and a career, you have to follow its agenda.
Mm-hmm.
You have to believe in uniformitarianism. If
like
you don't,
so many other fields of study.
all of them are like that, and
Right.
they're run by the Phoenicians, and they do that because they want you to think Earth is 6,000 years old. That's how old Phoenicia is, and that's the start of the Earth and civilization to them, and they just keep all the other information that proves that it's not, that civilization has gone but much further, very advanced. They keep that from us in our schools.
And
If you
all of
want to know
that
it,
diverting, misdirecting information, that's all taught in our educational system.
exactly. Our educational system is a propaganda system, a brainwashing system to keep humanity in one corner away from their true history.
Right.
All right. That's geology. All other sciences are similar. Geology is softer. It's not like math or physics where you got to have it exactly as nature says, or else whatever you're trying to build breaks, fails instantly.
Right. Those are the
You
exceptions.
right. You can get away with story making in geology. You can skip some evidence and then make something up and promote it and pretend that's real history. All right. Next.
Okay. Let's skip ahead a little bit to something that relates to what we're
Okay.
talking about right now. Since you have said the next crustal displacement could very well start in our lifetimes, do you know where the places are that are least likely to be impacted? And is it worth making plans for us who are aware of this to move there?
Yeah, the crustal displacement affect different parts of the surface of the planet differently, but all places get affected by earthquakes and tsunamis and so forth. The coastlines, interior of the continents, well, they don't have tsunamis there, but on the coast they do, where most people live today and back then. And so you never escape anywhere from the effects of it, whether it's earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanoes, or your changing climate. It's just the degree to which you can escape it. Interior of a nice flat continent, you'll be avoiding tsunamis and you have less earthquakes, because most of the earthquakes are on subduction
Coast.
zones and rift
Mm-hmm.
zones.
Right.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the coast, like west coast of North America
Mm-hmm.
and the Himalayas, or in the Middle East, not in the Middle East, I mean in the South Pacific and so forth. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And tsunamis, of course, on all the shorelines around the world. You don't want to live on oceans. They're coming once this crustal displacement starts. It's boom, bang. Earthquakes start increasing up. You know, the first year they'll increase by, say, 50 times. Next year, they'll be 100 times. And in 100 years, they'll be like 10,000 times. They're just decreasing.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not getting away from earthquakes or tsunamis. So you don't want to live on the coast.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just going to be having less damage in places that aren't so mountainous or on the ocean or near volcanoes. That's where you'd want to head. You can't. The thing is, because of the structure of our modern civilization, it prevents us from freely traveling. Right? We have the passports, this, and we go to a country, we have to pay taxes and follow their rules, their society, and they're all controlled by the elite, by the Phoenicians.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't get away from their control methods.
Especially now.
Right. And you try to move to a country and you can't go there, or
So even if we knew
I
this
mean,
information about what countries are going to be less impacted or whatever, and that's not predictable. Even if we knew that, we couldn't necessarily go there.
right. And once the crustal displacement starts, I need some water.
We won't be able to go there because everything, our technology will be knocked out.
Yeah, it goes very quick. Once it starts, the earthquakes start increasing. If you're in a plane, where are you going to land? There was just an earthquake in the city you're going to land at.
Right.
And our technology breaks down. We lose our electricity and oil and so forth rapidly, like in days or weeks.
Because
so you have no time to get anywhere.
right.
And you don't know when it would start. You can't say it started in the next tomorrow, in a month, or a year.
Right.
Very unpredictable. We can't all go back to the tropics in a nice climate right now. The countries just won't allow it.
Right.
The political system.
Right.
So everything today is structured to limit the freedom of people.
Right.
Their survivability. Okay.
So the answer to that question is no, it's not worth trying to.
It's not worth it. The best thing to do is stay where you are and find a way to live simply, that you can support yourself in your environment without dependency on artificial electricity or gasoline or whatever. Make all your own stuff. Learn how to grow food.
Mm-hmm.
If you do move to a warmer climate, you do the same thing. When the crustal displacement hits, society is going to be devastated. People are going to be starving. Mm-hmm. They're going to be turning to wild animals that will do anything for food because they won't be getting any food. Those mm-hmm. supply systems are over. They're starving. Mm-hmm. All they got to eat is trees. And so they're coming for everybody's food until it's gone. So it's not going to be nice.
Yeah.
All right. Wherever you are.
Okay.
Especially in cities, there'll be like killer holes.
Yeah.
You know, earthquakes will set them on fire, but people are starving, and there's millions, tens of millions of them. What's going to happen there?
Not pleasant to contemplate. So let me just ask one more question. Can you
Okay.
speculate what day-to-day life would be like before things went awry with the rise of the Phoenicians? With so many of our fruits being hybridized, what do you think their diet was like? What do you think the diet of the advanced civilizations, like the ones that were doing things stably, do you think they understood what they needed to eat and how they needed to live to be healthy?
Oh yeah. They, of course, before the Phoenicians, 10,000 years before that, and 50, 100,000, we were studying nature and inventing ways to manipulate it to benefit ourselves, including hybridizing fruit and all vegetables. We created them.
Mm-hmm.
All these vegetables you see in the store are all based on wild fruit and vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that's part of it. It's normal. It's good. They're doing simple hybridization, just picking plants that grow in a certain way over others. So
Mm-hmm.
they are bigger or last longer or whatever qualities you like. Now, the day-to-day life would be very different then it was than now. Much more stable, much more strict. They had rules. You can do this, but you can't do that. Today, it's do anything you want. We had family structure, very tight, constant, unchanging family structure. The
Mm-hmm.
was a male, was a female. She did female things, and the male did male things, and they contributed to make a solid family that they could raise kids to do the same.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas today, we're taught for profit, making money. The female and male have to be so-called equal, meaning the same thing, same
Right.
work, same behavior,
Right.
and then brainwashed to dislike each other, to distrust each other. They think
Yes.
males are there to kill women and take advantage of them, and the women are there to pick on men or
Take advantage of them.
take advantage of them, whatever. We're taught to fear each other by all these
Mm-hmm.
scams being run and false activity or events,
Mm-hmm.
and separated, in other words, divided, and thusly
Yeah.
conquered.
Conquered.
And in comes the savior to say, oh, buy this or go to this class and learn better, to become a better human by these elites, right?
Mm-hmm.
Buy these, take these drugs to get over your worry. The profiteering system.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, we live much differently. We live in very stable culture, grew their own food, more local, more basic earth technology that if you get hit by a crustal displacement or something, you may make it yourself. Everybody knew how to do things. It wasn't one specialist or 1,000 specialists over in a country in another part of the world that you're dependent on to make goods for you so you can live. You made them yourself.
Right.
Your food you grew around you on your land, or
So there was
right,
work. There was work, but it was
right, productive work for your own life, and that's what made it so valuable. And
right.
connecting to not only your inner self but to earth, you were part of one whole living and dead system there, and creating your life, and that's the most valuable thing in the world.
It reminds me of what people feel like when they go into business for themselves, the way that they feel about their business
Yeah,
as opposed to the way they used to feel about their job.
it's exactly that. Grow your own food, make a garden, plant it, and then pick it, and you'll get that feeling. Wow,
Right.
I made this, and I get to eat it and bring it into me, and I'm becoming what I created, kind of like,
Right. It's not
there's
like work,
belonging.
it's like
It's
love.
not work. You don't look at it as work. You look at it as my life. What I
Right.
want to do is like breathing air. I want to breathe air. I don't. That's not work.
Right.
There's value in it. There's payback.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember when when I first started thinking about humans being tropical and what life must have been like before civilization. I remember thinking, well, we didn't do anything. We just played all day, and because the fruit was just growing everywhere, we didn't have to grow it, and that might have been what wild human life was like, but that was eons ago before we got tossed out of the tropics because of crustal displacement. Since then, it's been more productive and structured in these past civilizations.
Much more complicated if you want to know we live in the past, you'd go more to in long millions of years ago. You just look at wild tribe. Now they're not just sitting around picking fruit and then sleeping or taking it easy. They're building shelters for themselves, little simple grass huts, and they're foraging. They're going out always. They're teaching their young, raising their young. The men are providing food, say, protecting. They're all learning about dangers out in the wild and how to protect themselves from that. They got to teach everybody that and live it. They create a societal structure, say 100 people in a tribe. They're making celebration times, for marriages or whatever, interrelationships. So they're very busy all the time, and they're creating a strong culture that's then passed down generation to generation and never changes because it works. All right. So they're not, and then the fruits picking in the trees or whatever they're all eating, that takes some time, but it's just a small part of it. All right. And then now we civilized, so we added agriculture, growing vegetables and fruit and crops, and then transportation systems, very complex communication systems, right? Through language.
And those things would be present even in stable civilizations.
Yeah, there too, but simpler versions of it. And stable versions that don't change, like mythology. Right? Meaningful stuff. Stuff that if an earthquake hits, it doesn't destroy the whole village. Right. Maybe one building, and they can rebuild that. Everybody participates to help the person rebuild.
Right.
As a natural way to prosper the community, not one person having to pay for it because he was unlucky. Everyone joins in. Right. There's a help in the community. Right? So, they grow their own food right around themselves. It's stable. And they're in small pockets, so it's not 10 million and an earthquake hits and destroys the 10 million. No, it's just one little tribe there. If they get knocked out, well, there's 50 others nearby that were all right. So that's how they live differently. We don't live like that now. We're very technical. We're based on oil consumption, which will stop immediately when a crustal displacement hits. Electricity, a dam can be destroyed by an earthquake in no time. All right? Frail technologies. And now we have digital computers. Well, computer has to be at a certain temperature. It can't be too cold or too hot. Can't bump it, can't drop it, can't get water on it. It's always got bugs in it. And you lose power, there goes your control of your whole house and business and everything else that computers are used. Okay, what do you do now? You're screwed. You got no phone because this is based on computers. You got no TV. You got no communication system anymore. Right. Stuck on a
We're just moving into more and more frailty all the time.
Yeah, and that takes more work and is able to be profited off of, right? It's all about profit. And very frail, with no regard that it's robust, that it could stick to or handle an earthquake hitting it, or a flood, or something, volcanism, or a huge change in climate, nothing like that. And we need that. To be able to live on Earth long term, we need our technology, our inventions to be able to endure that. We have calm times now, so it's easy. But once you get across the displacement, all hell breaks loose.
Right.
Nature, you hit the wall of nature, all right? And you don't get by it.
So it all comes back to this cyclical cataclysmic event. It happens every 20,000 years that's been hidden from us. It's been kept from us.
Yeah, forever. And kept from us. Yeah, we're not taught about it. And the displacement itself lasts 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years, and then it calms down again. And civilization developed also in that active period to develop all these ways of life. And that became a culture. And then they carry it on through the easy times because their life's based on that. And then when the next one hits, they still have that knowledge and experience because they're living it. So they can make it through the next one. They're roughed up, but they make it. And then they can develop and expand populations after it and redevelop anything they lost.
But during this calm period that we're inhabiting right now, we've lost all of that previous information and
the culture. We lost our culture. And that had all the information in it and the behavior. We exist today just like the natives of America who were invaded by the English that came in and wiped out their culture, and that ended the life of the nature of the natives. That they're gone, they're going extinct. And that's what's happened to us as a civilization on the planet, as a humanity. We've been invaded, infiltrated by the Phoenicians, who were profit seekers, and they destroyed our culture that was sustaining our life for the long term. They used our work to create profit for themselves and richness for themselves, right? And then rulership. And that we've lost our culture, our stable culture, our way of life, our understanding of Earth. And by that, we've lost our life.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, with that, I think we're going to have to end this video.
Right.
I did have a few more
All right.
questions, but we can
Yeah, there's so
continue
many
them for
questions
next
one could
time.
ask.
Yeah. Right.
Once you understand the
So,
basics and then realize how humanity, modern humanity doesn't fit in anymore to how we used to live, then it just goes forever. You can see how many questions there are.
okay.
All
Well,
right.
hopefully there will be another video sometime in the
Yeah.
future, and we'll get to some of those other questions. But in the meantime, I hope this has been helpful for everybody who watched it. And thank you, Robert, for taking the time and for answering all those questions.
Yeah,
Very
no problem.
illuminating.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I'll see you the
Bye.
next time. Bye bye.